Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1261, Saturday, October 10th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so we have some really important Spygate stories to cover today, as well as probably the most, important story that we've had on the Durham investigation since he was appointed. We can now see that Durham is clearly onto something. And there's a very important story to talk about today that will detail that, so you'll definitely want to stick around for that. So first, let's get a couple items out of the way. Important stories, but small in comparison to the major story that we're going to talk about today about the Durham investigation, taking a very interesting new turn. So let's get the easy ones out of the way first. Okay, so we had Maria Bartiromo had Mike Pompeo on her program, I think it was Friday morning, and she played for him a clip where Trump is expressing his frustration with the FBI and the CIA and the State Department for, bottling up information, not releasing information, even though he's ordered it to be released and all that kind of thing. So Maria Bartiromo plays this clip for Mike Pompeo, and his response to that was to tell Maria Bartiromo, he says, well, in fact, we have located the Rotten Reverend Clinton's deleted emails, and he says her deleted emails. And he said we will be releasing them before the election. So there we have Pompeo telling Bartiromo Friday morning, that the State Department has located the Rotten Reverend Clinton's deleted emails, and that they are going to begin releasing them before the election. So that is certainly news. I kind of think that would have been big enough news that once Pompeo figured out that they had located them emails, he probably should have sent out a tweet, or at least what he's told Trump, but apparently he didn't. He's just now telling us, but that's what he told Bartiromo, that they have found the Rotten Reverend Clinton's deleted emails. We assume he's talking about the 3,000 deleted emails that were supposedly about Chelsea's wedding and yoga. And he said they will be released before the election, and that's fantastic. But I still kind of go back to something, I know a lot of people on this channel go back to this, and yeah, it's nice to find those 3,000. We certainly should get those 3,000 deleted emails. They never should have been deleted in the first place. That was obstruction, destruction of evidence, obstructing an investigation. She should have been charged for that. She was not. Whether she will be now or not, I don't know. What's going to be learned from them emails, we're all about to find out. But let's not forget that there are still, according to this FBI agent who was handling the Weiner laptop, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 655,000 Hillary Clinton emails on Weiner's laptop. And I am absolutely certain that the FBI copied that hard drive. I mean, it would be unprecedented if they did not. So where the computer is not really important. The fact is, I'm sure somewhere, locked up somewhere in the FBI's, dungeon, there is a mirrored copy of that hard drive with 655,000 Clinton emails on it. And supposedly, there were things on there, according to these FBI agents who were told about it, said there was things that this FBI agent had related to other people, other agents, in that field office that were so bad that several of them had to actually go vomit. It's really bad. And that stuff is buried. And it's never going to see the light of day as long as Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray is the director. That's why the day after the election, Ray has to be fired. And Trump needs to put someone in there who's got the guts to go to whoever's sitting on that mirrored copy of the Weiner laptop hard drive and retrieve it and put it out. So we'll continue to follow this and see what comes of that, and whether or not Pompeo backs it up with some action. Someone else told us they were going to release some things before the election. Remember him? Mr. Barr? Speaking of Barr, we had a couple stories yesterday, multiple media outlets reporting that Attorney General Barr is now telling some Republican leaders, I'm sure that would be Nunes and Jordan, they're the guys that are always asking. Barr is now telling these Republican leaders that there will be no report and no charges until after the election because they're concerned it will look political. Well, I thought that the release of any information or any charges would not be based in any way, shape, or form on the election. And Barr said as long as it's not one of the two candidates, it's not considered interfering in the election. And as far as I know, Trump and Pence and Harris and Biden are not, subjects of the investigation, according to Barr. So, yeah, this has angered a lot of people. It's certainly angered the president, but he was on Rush Limbaugh on Friday, and he did tell Rush, he said, for a long time now I've been saying that I have not gotten involved, but that I could get involved, and I may have to get involved. So he did say on Limbaugh's show on Friday that he realizes now he is going to have to get involved. He is now going to get involved. So I would expect that right after he wins re-election, one of the very first things I think you can expect to see is I think we can expect to see Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray fired and replaced. Hopefully he will replace him with someone good who will get to the bottom of it. Maybe Richard Grenell would be good. But yeah, I mean, Attorney General Barr really laid an egg on this one. And again, as I've said now for the past 3 weeks or so, as I was saying, if they don't do it by the end of September, that's the end. You cannot release something like this just from if I was a political advice person, if I was a political advisor, I would say no. In the month of October, don't release it. Don't release it. I mean, I understand the other side of it. Yeah, do release it so you can show what they all did. But I'm telling you, when you release anything in October, it just gets washed away as, political dirty trick. It doesn't get taken seriously. It gets mixed into a bunch of other things. It just gets buried, and it just... If they were going to do it, they had to do it before October, and they didn't. So now here we are. So now, yes, it's probably best to wait till after the election. I'm not giving Barr a free pass on that, though. Very, very disappointed in Attorney General Barr. And I'm still not 100% of a mind that he is going to actually deliver. My thoughts are on Barr, pretty much if they've always been, that he's like, on one hand, I think he understands that this needs to be aired out. But on the other hand, I think he wants to, preserve the institution. And I think that that's where the problem lies. He doesn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But in this particular case, you got to throw out the baby, man. It's not your little cuddling cute little baby. It's alive baby. The it's alive baby. That's the baby we're talking about. Yes, that baby does have to be thrown out with the bathwater and the bathtub, the plumbing, and the entire second floor. It's all got to go. It's completely debauched. It's completely destroyed when the FBI will use its resources to do everything that it did to try to interfere in a political campaign, and then after failing at that, go for the coup. That's not the baby you can save. That's the baby that has to be thrown out with the bathwater. You can't save it, Mr. Barr. It's over. Get it all out, or you got to get out. One of the two. That's the solution. And if you have to change the name of that organization, burn it to the ground, come in and level the building and build a new one and give it a new name, do that. You can't save this baby. It's a live baby. You got to put it down. That's what they did in the movie. And the Gateway Pundit had an article yesterday. Again, this article, and so this was an important release. Now, Sidney Powell, I think this is what Sidney Powell was talking about when she was on Liz McDonald's show on Wednesday, when she said there's another thing coming out regarding the Michael Flynn case. And sure enough, on Friday, we just had so many things come out on Friday that it got buried. But it's an important story, but I think the Gateway Pundit kind of misses it a little bit, but because their take on it was James Baker has flipped. And I'll get into that in a second. But first, let's talk about what was actually released. What was released was the handwritten notes from James Baker. We're talking about James Baker, General Counsel, FBI, Comey's lawyer, who knew about everything from the Carter Page fices, the Michael Flynn case. You know, he's the FBI's top general counsel, their top attorney. Everything went through him. You know, Crossfire Hurricane, informants, Michael Flynn, everything had to go through Baker. So these are his handwritten notes. In his notes, he's referring to the other DOJ lawyers prosecuting Michael Flynn, and his handwritten notes are basically telling them that you don't have him. And what you're trying to do here is very, very, it's very, very risky what you're trying to do here. You don't have him. And here's some of his exact words in those notes. He's speaking to these other DOJ attorneys who are attempting to prosecute Flynn. He says to him, how can you assess a false statement charge on Flynn when there is no underlying crime? How can you assess a false statement charge on Flynn when there's no underlying crime? Then he goes on to say that you didn't allow Flynn to clarify. You just charged him. Because it's very, very gray, if you even want to call it that. It's really not there at all. But if you really want to work at it and you're real corrupt, you can try to make it work. But even then, it's gray area. And that's when Baker says, look, even if you want to go for this thing, it's such gray area. It's such a, you know, you're leaning so far in that direction. You know, you at least got to go game to clarify. Because it's so much gray area here. And they didn't even do that. As he says, you didn't even allow him to clarify. You just charged him. How can you assess a false statement charge on Flynn when there's no underlying crime? And he goes on to make more references. It's clear that James Baker is telling them, I mean, you do not have him. You do not have him, and you're really getting, you know, way over the edge here. You crossed the line. You've gone too far. You don't have him. You better pull back. It was really what he was signaling to them. But they did not take his advice, and they moved ahead. And so we've had multiple revelations from James Baker over the past 2 years or so, from emails and testimony he has given. And so we've been hearing for 2.5 years now that Baker has flipped. Baker has flipped. You know, the term flip, when you use the word flip, what you're talking about is someone who comes in and spills their guts. You know, like some guy who was in the mafia for 25 years, and one day he has a, you know, come to Jesus moment, gets religion, and he goes into the FBI and says, man, I just want to come clean. I bet I was in the mob for 25 years. I mean, I witnessed assassinations. I witnessed, you know, murders and robberies and this and that and, you know, all kinds of corruption. I'm just going to spill my guts. I'm going to give it all to you. I'm just going to flip. So that's what you're talking about when you're flipping. I don't think James Baker or anyone up to this point has flipped. I think at the very least, and I've seen Baker interviewed on TV a few times, pretty smart lawyer. I don't think he's flipped. I think Baker, like everyone else in this scheme, along with their high-priced lawyers, when they're caught on something, they're only going to say what they have to say, the very minimum amount what they have to say to try to cover their butt. They're not going to fully cooperate until they're looking at heavy criminal charges against them. That's the only time people flip, is when you actually hit them with serious felony charges. Then you can get them to flip. But just by the release of some fairly damning emails or testimony that they've given, and had Baker flipped, Baker knows everything. He was the general counsel at the FBI. Everything went through him. If he would have flipped, this thing would have been over 2 years ago. Because they'd have everything. Yeah, he could just tell them everything. Just tell the whole story. He could spill his guts on the table, and it would be over. He hasn't done that. I would say that I would characterize Baker at this point as a reluctant, cooperating witness to the minimal extent that he has to. He will say as little as he has to say. He's not going to come out and, you know, drop the bomb or anything like that. Not until he's facing. Now, when they come out and say, "Oh, well, Baker, we're getting ready to hit you with 15 felonies. You're going to jail for life, dude. Then he will start singing like a bird. But until they drop heavy charges on him, he's not just open up and start, spilling his guts. He is a reluctant, cooperating witness only to the minimal extent that he has to cooperate based on one thing. He's not going to sit there and talk about all kinds of things. He's going to say as little as he has to say. Remember, he's a good lawyer. He's the top FBI general counsel. Very good lawyer. Smart guy. I've seen him interviewed. He's not an idiot. And we've seen this kind of thing from Baker over the past 2 years. This is like not the first time we've had this deal with Baker. And Baker continues to me to look like a guy who had 1 foot, over here on this side of the line and 1 foot on this side of the line. Like he hated Trump. He wanted to defeat Trump. He wanted Hillary to win. He wanted to take down Trump if there was something there. But there was the other part of him, the smart lawyer part of him, that was saying, yeah, but what if this doesn't work? I mean, if anyone ever comes back and looks at this, I mean, we're in a lot of trouble. So I think he was like the reluctant, not so much he was reluctant to take down Trump, but he was reluctant to take down Trump in a way that would expose him and all these other people to possible criminal charges if it didn't work. And I think that's always how I've seen Baker, is a guy who would like for it to have worked, but it didn't. And he was always thinking about that. Like, that'd be great if this works, but what if it doesn't? He was always the guy probably looking at it from the glass half full. While the other 8 or 9 lawyers sitting there say, yeah, we're going to get Flynn. We're going to get Trump. We're going to get them all. We're going to take them all down. That was Baker probably sitting over in the corner going, yeah, but what if we don't? We better think long and hard about what we're doing here. We can't screw this up. If you're going to do this, you better do it right. And this is not right. This is, if this doesn't work, we're all going to have a lot of trouble. He strikes me as being very cautious. And probably from what we've seen from him in previous testimony, emails, he was always throwing caution. They never took his advice and exercised any of that caution, and he just was caught up in it. And I guess, for whatever reason, he probably at some point should have left the FBI and said, man, I'm getting out of this thing while I can. But he didn't. He continued to go along with it, and he got sucked into it, and I think he's sorry that he did. But as far as him flipping, no, I would not categorize him as flipping. I would say best case scenario, he's a reluctant, cooperating witness, only to the extent that he has to cooperate at the very minimal level. Charge him with a bunch of felonies, he can probably sing the entire tune backwards. Let's move on now to the main story of the day. And this is very interesting. It shows us that the Durham investigation's taken a really different turn, and there's a lot to unpack here. It's kind of complex. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, in general, what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to just read through some notes I took of some real specific details, which will confuse you a bit. Then I'm going to come back and clear it all up, so that you at least understand what's going on. And there's 2 or 3 different takes on this. Shipwrecked Crew has a good take on it. Last Refuge, or Sundance I should say, has a good take on it. They're very similar. And then I have a take on it. We're all basically around the same bullseye, around the same target. But anyway, so the big story, and this was all based on a story that ran in the New Yorker on, I think, Wednesday. And so there's a story in the New Yorker on Wednesday about how Alfa Bank, remember Alfa Bank was the bank that was mentioned in the dossier. The owners of Alfa Bank have Christopher Steele. In fact, they've already beat Christopher Steele. They won that lawsuit. Alfa Bank won that lawsuit against Christopher Steele, and he had to pay him like $70,000 or something in damages. Now they're moving on to Fusion GPS, and I think they're looking at possibly filing civil suit against Perkins Coie. But now, in the case that they're looking at, and I think it's with Fusion GPS, they're asking, in fact, they're subpoenaing certain witnesses and making certain allegations. At the exact same time that these lawyers in this civil suit are issuing subpoenas in the civil suit and wanting to talk to certain individuals and are making certain claims for the reasons why they want to interview these individuals, Durham's investigation has now, we are learning, confirmed, has impaneled a grand jury, and Durham is now subpoenaing the exact same people. Now, because it's a criminal investigation, he's not saying exactly why, but we know it's exactly for the same reason that Alfa Bank is. The New Yorker story, and the heart and meat and potatoes of the story, is that they're suggesting that Durham and his investigative team are working leastways in a parallel fashion, not necessarily working with or cooperating with each other, but are working in a parallel investigation. There may be some sharing of information, but they're apparently going after the exact same people for the exact same reason. Alfa Bank is in a civil suit. Durham is in a criminal investigation. And the allegations that are being made by Alfa Bank, by their lawyers, are that some, high-level crooked techies working for some group of people who are very well funded sent emails to Trump's servers to make it look like they were from Trump and being sent to Alfa Bank. In other words, they're suggesting that these high-level IT guys, crooked IT guys working for a well-funded group, planted fake evidence on the Trump servers, then alerted some computer scientists. That's the term they use, computer scientists, but they're actually talking about CrowdStrike. Then they alerted these computer scientists to that fake evidence, who then tipped off the press. So that's the general narrative. Now, let me go through some of these notes, and then I'll try to clarify it. So this will take a minute to go through the various three cards full of notes, and it'll be kind of confusing to you, but then I'll come back and clear it up. So Alfa Bank and the Durham investigation appear to be working together, or at least ways cooperating maybe, or working on a parallel track. Alfa Bank's lawyers, who are now in a legal case with, I do believe it's Fusion GPS, because they just won the case against Steele. Alfa Bank's lawyers believe that there were attackers who sent emails to Trump servers to make it look like they were from Trump organization going to Alfa Bank, and that these attackers were working for a well-funded group, and that this well-funded group hired these attackers to plant fake evidence on the Trump servers, and then they alerted other computer scientists, who we believe are talking about CrowdStrike, to the fake evidence, and then the computer scientist tipped off the press. They have identified one of the, I guess they refer to him as attackers, as someone named Max, and they have identified two other cyber hacker attackers as going by the name Tea Leaves. Max and Tea Leaves. Alfa Bank has subpoenaed a couple individuals that they think either are Max and Tea Leaves, or they know who Max and Tea Leaves are. They've also subpoenaed documents and logs from these servers that they analyzed. So Alfa has issued subpoenas of the DNS logs to identify who Max and Tea Leaves are. And they suspect that Max and Tea Leaves, they believe that Max is some guy named Steve Belovin, Belovin, and he is some computer scientist guy, some computer tech guy, I guess, at Columbia University. Then you also have two other people who are believed to be Tea Leaves, and one of them is a name we're familiar with. We've already talked about here on TowerGate. She's in my timeline, and that is this woman, Jean Camp, from the University of Indiana, and another guy named Dan Gilmore from the ACLU. Now, this Jean Camp story has been around for a long time. Jean Camp was a professor at Indiana University. She has a side business which does like cyber type stuff. She was supposedly one of the people who fed information directly to the DNC or the Clinton campaign. It made its way to Michael Sussman, the Right Reverend Clinton's lawyer, who then proceeded to walk into James Baker's office, General Counsel James Baker's office, and present him with this information that was given to him by, we believe, Jean Camp. Then, according to Christopher Steele, It was in a meeting with Michael Sussman that Sussman told Steele about this Alfa Bank server, the same information he gave to Baker that he got from Gene Camp. He's the one who, according to Steele, gave him the Alfa Bank story, which Christopher Steele proceeded to put into the dossier. It came from Michael Sussman, Hillary's lawyer, who gave it to Steele and who hand-delivered it to James Baker at the FBI, and it apparently came from this woman, Gene Camp, and apparently this other guy, Dan Gilmore from the ACLU. They are believed to be tea leaves. And then you have this other person who's supposed to be Max, and his name is Steve Belloven. And these are supposedly the three people who are Max and tea leaves who are being accused or alleged by Alfa Bank's lawyers of being the people who planted that fake information on Trump's servers, so then they could turn around and alert some computer scientists like CrowdStrike, hey, we think there's some dirty stuff on Trump's servers. Yeah, because they planted it there. And then they would discover it, and then they would leak it to the press or whoever. That is what is being alleged by Alfa Bank. The subpoenas, along with the server logs of the servers that they looked at, are being requested by Alfa Bank's lawyers. What makes this strange is at the exact same time that this is happening, Durham, and this is now confirmed, has impaneled a grand jury and has subpoenaed the exact same three people and the exact same computer logs. Durham is going down the exact same path as these lawyers from Alfa Bank. They've discovered the same thing. Alfa Bank is also subpoenaing the records of the Democracy Integrity Project. You've heard of this before as well. This is this nonprofit that was run by Daniel Jones, who many of you are familiar with as well. He was formerly an investigator for the Senate Intel Committee, and of course he's the one who helped decipher the DNS records from that Alfa Bank server. And of course we know that he left right after Trump was elected. He left his position there. He worked for Dianne Feinstein at the time. She advocated her position on the Senate Intelligence Committee, stepped aside and allowed Mark Warner to become the lead guy on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Then at the same exact time, Dan Jones leaves. He goes and he becomes head of this organization, which he says was funded to the tune of $500 million by what he says was 10 very wealthy men from California and New York. And of course we now learn that Durham has impaneled his grand jury and has sent subpoenas to exactly the same three people I just mentioned to testify to a grand jury. He also wants the DNS logs. He is pursuing criminal charges against Max and Tea Leaves for giving false information to the government. So it sure seems like Durham and Alfa have discovered the same thing. They may or may not be coordinating, but they are certainly running a parallel investigation. One is a civil case and the other is a criminal investigation. Also, we have learned that Alfa has also recently subpoenaed Igor Danchenko. And all this is in the the New Yorker article. And we, of course, have Sundance on Conservative Treehouse confirming that the Durham grand jury has been impaneled. It has issued these subpoenas. Excuse me. And that the intel planted on the Trump servers is most certainly came from the contractors who accessed the NSA database. So that also comes into play. That's where Sundance brings this into play and suggests that, remember, the 99-page FISA court document, which had the names of the three contractors blacked out. Remember, Durham saw that a long time ago, and the names are not blacked out. So he knows who the people were who were accessing the NSA database. Sundance believes that Daniel Jones investigating him And these three people who are supposedly Max and Tea Leaves will lead Durham directly to the contractors who are inside the NSA database. And it looks like it may have been these people, Max and Tea Leaves, along with either Confusion GPS or maybe CrowdStrike, who were the contractors who are getting access to the database. That's what's being suggested by Sundance. And of course, remember, Durham has seen the unredacted. He knows, and he has known for a long time. So Sundance believes that Dan Jones is the guy who opens the door into the corrupt activities at the SSCI, the Select Committee for Intelligence in the Senate, headed up at that time by Mark Warner. We also know that Dan Jones admitted that he got $50 million from 10 wealthy donors in New York and California, who are all Soros connected. And of course, we know that as soon as Daniel Jones left the Senate, Trump gets elected, Feinstein steps down, Warner takes over, Dan Jones leaves, he goes to head up this organization. It's well funded by these California and New York billionaires to the tune of $50 million. Then he immediately hires Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, even though the election's over and Trump has won. But keep in mind, Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS and Steele were being paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign. But they stopped paying in October because that was it. The election's over. So immediately almost after the Clinton campaign stops paying Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele, Dan Jones starts paying them. And it's being suggested by Sundance that the paying of Fusion and GPS was not so much to pay them to do anything, because they'd already done what they had done. It had already been proven to be bunk. But rather that it was not just paying them to do anything, to do any more work, but rather that it was a payoff to get both Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele to keep their mouths shut about what they had been a part of. It was payoff money, and Jones is simply acting as the bagman. Remember, he is the guy who also very likely, unwillingly, he is the guy who also will likely or unwillingly lead Durham right into the NSA database, Mark Warner, and the SSCI, the Select Intelligence Committee. So here we have a very interesting story. Alfa Bank and John Durham now going after the exact same people who they believe planted that information on Trump's server at Trump Tower, and then went to CrowdStrike and said, hey, we think there's some stuff on this server. Y'all look at this. So CrowdStrike comes in, they see it, then they start leaking stuff to the press. Then it finds its way to the FBI. Then we get all the stories about it. It gets blown up. This was really the first big part of the Trump-Russia collusion thing. And now we can see that Durham and Alfa Bank are pursuing the exact same people, wanting the exact same information, subpoenaing them, grand juries impaneled, the whole 9 yards. And it looks like all this could lead straight to Dan Jones, who also has been subpoenaed, along with a bunch of records that he would have. And it looks like if they get to Dan Jones and prove that this is in fact what happened, it will likely lead them directly to the contractors who were getting this information out of the NSA database, which is likely where they got the information that they planted on the Trump server. And it may turn out to be true that it was these three people that were being identified as Max and Tea Leaves who plant that information. Durham clearly believes that's the case, or he wouldn't have impaneled a grand jury and subpoenaed them. So it's a very interesting turn that things are taking right now in relation to the Durham investigation and the Alfa Bank lawsuit. So we'll just have to continue to follow up on this. I'm sure there'll be more to come, and I'll be on top of it every day, as I think there's definitely a lot of smoke around this fire, and I think something's definitely coming out of this. We'll keep posted on it. See you. Bye.